blah blah, please accept within the next I'm on a webinar. Yeah, I'll call you back later. Bye. Bye.
Charlotte, you're on mute.
Oh, good morning, everyone. I muted everyone because it was noisy and obviously muted myself. So welcome to today's cybersecurity webinar hosted by Haslers and in partnership with Utilise. I'll hand you over in a moment, but just a little bit of housekeeping before we get going. So we are actually recording today's session, so we'll be sending it to you after the webinar in case you want to review any of the slides or anything that was discussed. If you do have any questions at all, please feel free to pop them in the chat during the session, and we'll be taking questions at the end. So yeah, if you want to pop it in there in case you're going to forget, or feel free to ask at the end, that's absolutely fine as well. So I'll pass you now over to Haslers Business Services Group Partner Christina, and she'll just make a general introduction for you before we pass over to David Tuck from Utilise. So I'll pass you over to Christina. Christina, you're probably likely muted.
Yeah. Okay, thanks very much. Thanks, Charlotte. Morning, everybody, and welcome to the Haslers and Utilise webinar on cybersecurity. We at Haslers have been working with Utilise for many years now, and we greatly appreciate their expertise and support with our IT systems, especially in this day and age with the threat landscape as it is. I recently asked Utilise if they would put together a webinar for our clients on cyber risks, as it's such an important topic and very hot topic at the moment. So to help us understand these threats and what we can do to minimise these risks, I'm passing you over now to David Tuck from Utilise, who's leading our webinar today. Over to you, David. Thank you.
Thanks, Christina. Right. Hopefully you can all see my slides. I'll just move on to the first one. Yeah, just to explain a little bit, I'm a security consultant for Utilise. So as well as Haslers, I work with about 400 other companies across the southeast predominantly, but we also cover London and East Anglia and some other places in between as well. So what I want to do today is really talk to you a little bit about information security. We have a loose agenda. It's around about an hour in total. It just really does depend upon how much I talk and how much I get carried away by the subject. I'm a little bit passionate, so I will apologise in advance a little bit for that. But what I wanted to do is talk to you a little bit about what we're seeing in the current threat landscape, a little bit about phishing attacks and some things you can look out for, and then a little bit about the dark web as well, and what you can do to protect your business. And as I say, at the end there will be a question and answer session. I will try and answer any questions with regard to the webinar, but if you have anything generally in information security, please drop them as well. If I can't answer them today, we can get back to you and discuss them separately with you if you wish. So with that, I'm going to just drop in to where we are. Current threat landscape. This is my initial slide, and I'll put it up here for a little bit of impact because I just really wanted to give you some idea of the global size of cybercrime damage. Now, this is a 2021 slide. The 2022 slide is not been actually put together, but it will be somewhere substantially larger than this. But when you look at those figures, they are really, really scary. $16.4 billion per day cybercrime damage in 2021, $190,000 a second. Now, to give you some sort of context, because looking at those figures, they probably don't mean much, that is twice the global domestic product of the UK. So if it was a business or if it was a country, it would be twice the size of the UK, and that's just cybercrime. What's driving that? Well, we're seeing a lot of organizations in crime moving from the drug traffic to the cybercrime. They've got a lot of money and they're investing their drug money into cybercrime. It's much more lucrative. They don't have to move product around. They don't have to cross borders. It's much easier to do. So that's what we're seeing. So incidents by sector. Well, as you'd expect, pretty much everyone has really been affected by this. And this is actually from a survey in 2022. And you'll see in there large amounts of healthcare and public sector. They're slightly swayed because of the fact that healthcare and public sector have to actually notify of any cybercrime or a cyber event. So you see them a little bit larger than the other areas, but in reality, they're not. Everybody's being affected. Technology companies especially are targets, and that's what keeps me busy. But also we're seeing like professional services, finance, manufacturing, and also being targeted as well. Generally, what I'm trying to get across is it's everyone. No particular area is being targeted. It's every area. Cyber criminals are not that picky, unfortunately. So what are the top causes of security breaches? Well, continuing the theme is weakened stolen credentials. This is mainly through phishing attacks, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But that continues to be one of the main ways that cyber criminals are breaking into your systems. Ransomware. 236 million attacks reported globally in the first half of 2022 alone. It is actually dropping slightly, and we'll talk a little bit about that later, but it is still predominantly one of the main causes of security breach. Operating systems and application vulnerabilities. When I go around clients, I am still seeing clients out there who are running systems such as Windows XP, and old servers, Windows 2003, 2007. They're not being patched. They have security vulnerabilities. I still see that a lot. People aren't applying patches to their Windows PCs. They're not running Windows updates. They're not running antivirus updates. It would surprise you, but I still see that a lot. So that's part of the message. Make sure you're patching your systems. Security patches are really just that. They are fixes for vulnerabilities that have been identified on your systems. So you need to patch them because unfortunately criminals are very clever. They look for those issues and they will exploit them. And of course, what we also see is people incorrectly configuring their software. If you've got the tools, you've got your software, make sure you're configuring it correctly. If you don't, there's not a lot of point in having that. So I see that a lot. So just make sure that's there. Talk to your IT suppliers or your IT teams. Just make sure that you've got those configurations correct. And of course, by far the biggest is the human error. We are all fallible, unfortunately, and humans make mistakes, and that is one of the biggest causes. So we're looking at things such as social engineering attacks, as well as people clicking on the wrong things. Education is a theme, and I'll talk more about that as I go through. So to give you some idea, 39% of UK companies experienced a cyber attack in 2022. Now they're the ones that have admitted to it. The stat will be higher, but 39% of UK companies experienced some sort of cyber attack. Of these, 31% estimate they were attacked at least once a week. Just gives you sort of some idea of the scale. 82% of boards see cybersecurity as a high priority. Yet, and this is something which a little bit disappoints me, yet only 6% of UK businesses have cyber essentials and only 1% have cyber essentials plus. the pack information we'll give you will explain a little bit more about what Cyber Essentials is, but it is what's a baseline security model, which is published by the UK government, the National Cyber Security Centre. What every company should really be having in place at a base level. 45% of UK companies currently have employees that use personal devices for work. So this will be your mobile phone predominantly, but in some cases I do come across where people are using their own personal PCs to access company systems. This will be the same PC which perhaps their son or daughter was on a gaming site earlier, or downloading from social media, etc. So you can see that there is that possibility of causing a security breach by using that same device. And as I said earlier, 16% of businesses are still using older or non-supported versions of Windows software. Most people aren't aware that Windows only supports 2 versions of Windows 10 and Windows 11. So current versions which are supported for Windows 10, 21H2 and 22H2 are the only ones that Microsoft will be supplying security patches for. So it's always worth checking what version you're running to make sure you're running an up-to-date supported version. And of course, human element, as we said already. In smaller companies, only 27% of staff receive training. I see that a lot. And when people talk to me about that, what can we do? That is the main thing that I talk about. Train your staff. Ransomware does continue to grow. As I say, it's tailed off slightly a little bit in the first quarter of this year, which is a good sign. But that may be just because people aren't actually acknowledging it or reporting it. It became such an issue that in July 2022, the National Cyber Security Centre and the Information Commissioner's officer here in the UK actually issued a joint letter to the Law Society, trying to urge them to get their members not to pay the ransomware. At the time, 82% of UK companies would have paid the ransom against the global average of 58%. What this basically led to was that the UK became the most targeted country for cyber criminals for ransomware attacks. Criminals are pretty clever. If you're more likely to pay, they will target you. So that led to unprecedented action, really, with the National Cybersecurity and the ICO talking to the lawyers to try and get that figure reduced. And we have seen some sort of change there. So although in the second half of 2022, the figures did increase from 2021, the first half of 2022, sorry, there was a reduction in payments made to hackers. So that was a positive sign. We started to see that coming down. That was driven by that, with people not paying so much, and perhaps people being a little bit more aware of it. Once your lawyers start talking to you about it, people start to take notice a little bit more. So what is the impact of ransomware? What we're really seeing at the moment is a huge drive from the insurance companies. I don't know how many of you are actually filling in insurance forms, but you'll notice that if you filled one in this year, it's probably a lot more involved than last year. I've had 15-page forms from AIG Insurance, for instance, to fill in, and they want to know everything. So they are looking for you to have the controls and in place. There's been a significant increase in premiums because of the payouts for ransomware, and what we've actually seen is the insurance companies are actually asking the questions, and this has been driven by this large amount of payouts, and they wanted the requirement to reduce that. And what I've also seen from some companies is the insurance companies won't actually cover ransomware. They will cover you for the basics, such as your equipment break-in, etc., but they will not cover you for ransomware because you don't have those controls in place. What they do expect you to have now is at least the same amount as the National Cybersecurity Centre guidelines are suggesting. So this is where the Cyber Essentials correlation comes in. So having Cyber Essentials is quick and easy way of being able to prove to your insurance company that you are taking effective measures. And of course, under GDPR, you can also use that as a way of demonstrating that as well. So that's what we're seeing. What we've also seen in 2023 is some positive action from the actual industry. In 2022, Microsoft started blocking macros in Word or Office documents, and this led to a huge decrease in the amount of cybercrime and cyber security breaches that we saw. Used to get macros embedded in Excel and Word documents. You'd open them and you'd be compromised. Microsoft started blocking those, saw a great decrease. What we're also seeing now is what's called access as a service, where hackers will pay intermediary brokers for access to a particular client. So they will say, well, we want to target perhaps that company, and the broker will then go and try and get the credentials of that company for them. So it's, as you see, it's starting to be run as a business out there as well. As I say, payments are decreasing. And this is also being driven by the cryptocurrency regulations, which are coming in as well. And I've already mentioned the insurance companies. Right, so now I've probably scared you about the huge stats and a little bit what we're seeing out there. I want to talk to you a little bit more about phishing attacks and improving your security culture. Every day in the press, we see reports of security, cyber breaches, crime, and it is quite daunting. Even working in the industry, you know, you see this, and we tend to get a little bit blasé. It's not going to happen to us, but unfortunately, it possibly will. Cyber criminals are very, very opportunistic. During the pandemic, there was huge increases in the amount of phishing emails. They will take anything which is going on in the world and use it to their advantage. So we saw huge amounts of increase during the pandemic. We saw huge amounts when Russia invaded Ukraine, and we're continuing to see other security and events driving up malware and phishing. Ironically, even things such as Eurovision Song Contest led to a spike in phishing emails around hotel accommodation in Liverpool. So such things, even as that sort of things, are used by cyber criminals to actually try to entice you to hit the wrong button and do things. So they are big numbers, and it is a bit of a numbers game for cyber criminals. 3.4 billion phishing emails are sent to businesses daily worldwide. That's a huge amount. As it says there, over a trillion phishing emails each year. I can't even get my head around how big that figure is, but it's you know, it just gives you some sort of size and view of how it is. So, point of reference, emails sent daily, 333 billion. See, I can't even say the figures, they're getting so large, but it says that of all email, 1% is phishing. Huge amount of emails there. And as I said earlier, nearly 23% of companies based in the UK report over 500 doubtful emails each week. And these are the ones which are reporting it. A lot of companies are just not reporting it. It's just becoming so every day that these doubtful emails are coming through. And so what we do see is that people do tend to rely on their technical defenses, their mail filters, their spam filters, etc. And these are great, and they will block the majority, but occasionally something will get through. So what do we see? So, as you would expect, spam and phishing emails continue to be at the top in terms of attack. But the breaches are also being caused by this poor user practices and gullibility, lack of security training. And when I say gullibility, I've got to say that the cyber criminals are really, really clever. When you see examples of social engineering, you know, they are very, very prepared. So we've seen examples where they pretend to be people ringing up banks or ringing up employees, being very frantic, using pre-recorded children crying in the background to create the right sort of environment so people feel sorry for them and then let their guard down. Cyber criminals are very, very clever at that, and they rely on the fact that most people are real decent people and want to help each other, and unfortunately that can lead to examples of them getting into your systems. So being trained and being aware that that may be the case. Zero trust is something you'll hear about all the time. Don't trust anybody. Always believe that somebody's got to prove to you every time before they can get any of your information or into your systems. That's one of the things which I would try and get across to your staff. If it looks too good, if you're seeing any sort of messages of urgency, do this now, press this button, you've got 48 hours to respond, anything like that are general things to look for in phishing emails. So what can all this lead to? Well, obviously, as well as threats to your business, it can impact your customers as well. As I say, cybercrime can lead to breaches of information. It can mean that your client information has been breached. It can lead to penalties in terms of GDPR, disruption, and of course, reputation loss as well. If you've been impacted by cybercrime and you've had to report it and that gets out, now that's obviously going to have some sort of impact upon your business and potential loss of future business as well. So making sure you've got all these protections in place and you're doing the right thing is very, very important. One thing we do see, how do they get in? Well, human nature, really. So there are some examples of systems. Now, this is just the tip of the iceberg, as it were. But by human nature, when you're logging onto systems, fairly often, for instance, you may be logging onto Sage, your HR system, sometimes even other third-party systems like your bank or whatever. People tend to use their work email addresses. So if you're logging onto the gym, you might well use your work email address to do that. And of course, what people tend to do is, because they can't remember multiple passwords, is they use the same password or a derivative of their work password. Now, hackers know this. So when they hack, for instance, a third-party system, maybe like Yahoo or Booking.com, what they will do is they will take those passwords and they will try and correlate them across to you, and they will try those same passwords again. So it's very, very important that when you're using different systems, you use different passwords. Now, that can be really, really difficult. I have 148 passwords I currently use. I know one of those passwords, and that is the master password to the password safe I use. Every single other password I don't know. It's stored in my password safe. So looking at things like password safes can be one way to help you. Try, there's many out there, things such as Dashlane, LastPass, you can just Google password safes. Some of them are free, some of them are paid, but I find that they're very useful. I have a 16-character master password with multi-factor authentication locked to my particular device, and using that I can actually store all my passwords, and it allows me to do that. Let's say the attacks continue to carry on, and I could put countless screens like this up here. Let's talk a little bit about the employees. I mentioned social engineering already. 98% of cyber attacks rely on some sort of social engineering. But what we're also tending to see is the just in case. Employees aren't sure, so they will just click on it to have a look at it, just in case it was important. Now that is really, really dangerous, but that is human nature. A lot of people don't actually report that they've had a suspicious email or they've clicked on it because they fear getting into trouble. I've got to say to people, and this is what I try and express to people across: if your IT team or your management don't know that you've clicked on that email, they can't do anything to protect your organization. We all make mistakes, so you should never fear being putting your hand up and saying, I may have made a mistake, I may have clicked on an email, because as soon as that has been notified, something can be done to stop it. If you don't notify anyone, then they can't. Most hackers do not actually make you aware that they're on your systems. The average time that a hacker will be on your system before you know about it, it varies depending on what survey you say, but it's between around about 120 to 160 days before you become aware that they're there. Because hackers today don't take your systems down. They sit on your systems and they learn information. They learn how you talk to each other. So they learn when people are going on holiday. So how does the finance director talk to the CEO? Does he call him Bob or Pauline or whatever? They learn the language and then they take that as an opportunity. So when you actually do go away, that's when you'll get the Bob, I forgot to send the 500 vouchers out, which I was going to do to the clients this week, or I forgot to set up that account and transfer the £20,000 to this new company that we're dealing with. Can you just do that for me? And because the language is something familiar, a lot of people will fall for that. So that's what the hackers do. So they are learning how you talk. They are learning what's going on in your social, your calendar, etc. And they will be intercepting your emails and responding on your behalf. And fairly often you won't be aware of that. So these are sort of things to be aware of. So if you think you've clicked on something, say, put your hand up and say, I may have made a mistake. Something can be done about it. And if you think you may not spot a phishing email, these look pretty good to me. This is actually from my phishing kit, which you can buy on the internet, on the dark web for about $49, I think. The actual one, the real one, is the one on the right. But the only thing that really gives that away is when you look at the top. Now it has been blocked out because we don't really want you to see that website, but you can see that it's not facebook.com, it's facebook.html with some other link in there, and that's really the only giveaway. Apart from that, it looks exactly the same. On first view, you may think that you've gone to the right site, so it's very easy to actually fall victim to these sites, and if you do, then, as I say, notify somebody. Cyber attacks are inevitable. We're all being attacked all the time. It will happen. I suspect, your company is being attacked as we speak. But what it is about reducing that likelihood. As I say, your tools will prevent probably 99% of phishing emails and attacks getting through, but there will be that 1%, and it is a numbers game. So having a trained staff who are aware of what's going on out there, what to look for, can substantially reduce your risk and make sure that you're not falling the victim. And it may surprise you that training doesn't happen as much as it should, as we spoke to earlier. But how often should you be training your staff? Well, I would say probably monthly. So a lot of organizations will do yearly training, but I would suggest that monthly training, short snippets of training, it doesn't have to be an hour long each month, Not many of us have an hour's time every month just to do phishing training, but small snippets such as 5-minute training courses which just reinforce. So it could be things like phishing, it could be things like clear desk, and it could be things like what to look out for when you're out and about in a internet cafe, for instance, because a lot of people will still use the internet in a Starbucks or Costa or whatever, and they won't think about the consequences of doing that on an open shared network. So training your staff, short snippets of training, something which I recommend to do. Make it interesting and make sure you're getting them trained. Most people think it's the larger organizations that get targeted. That's not the case. You only hear about the larger organizations because they have a bigger impact. But actually, you're more likely to be receive a phishing email if you're a smaller company. Now, the reason for that is these larger companies have lots of tools and lots of staff who are there defending them. And the hackers know this. And they know in smaller organizations, you're less likely to have that. So they tend to target you. As I say, it's great if they can target a large organization and get £1 million from them, but they're quite happy to target 1,000 smaller organizations and get £1,000 from each. They're quite happy to do that. And in fact, they will often find that a lot easier to do because you don't have those defenses in place. And as I say, going back to the training, we reckon, or it's estimated that 97% of employees are unable to recognize a sophisticated phishing email. And by that, I mean it's ones which will, in many ways, look like a correct email. But running your phishing simulators can help. I will publish, a stat that we did about 5 years ago. This is being very honest. About 5 years ago, we implemented Teams. Being a gold part of Microsoft, we were one of the first companies. And so we put out some phishing simulation tests for our staff, where we said that they were being talked about by the operations director. And the first time we did that, bear in mind this is a little bit back, but the first time we did that, 80% of the staff internally clicked on the link because they thought, it can't be a phishing email. It must be true because it's talking about the operations director. Well, the name of the operations director is on our website, so it was very easy for us to do that, and it would be very easy for a hacker to do that. But I've got to say, after we were on phishing simulation training, and that's substantially dropped, and I'm pleased to say that we do these regularly, and we're down to 0 now. I think that's because of people being trained, and because I would wander around time to time and scare the living daylights out of them, I guess. But I mean, it is a bit about training your staff, making them aware, being suspicious of anything which they see, which is a little bit out of the ordinary. So phishing simulations work. So I'll talk a little bit about phishing. I'll say I can talk a lot, so I'll talk a little bit about the dark web now. We all hear about the dark web, but do we really know what it is? Well, really, what I want to talk about is which might surprise you, is actually it is the dark web is part of the ordinary internet. Now, if you look at the internet as a whole, the part that you use, your Google website, your BBC, your Marks and Spencer's website, etc., around about 4% of the actual internet. The majority of the internet is actually what's called the deep web, and this is why the internet was originally set up, because that's the area where research organizations, etc., will share information. Now, you can't generally get to that, but it's not malicious, but you need to know the access URLs and where to get that information from, and that will be the majority of the internet, and that's why the internet really took off. But of course, criminals are very clever. They saw an opportunity, and so they saw that it was very anonymous, parts of the internet, so they started to use it for their own purposes. As you can see there, I mean, 6% of the internet is dark web. Now that's larger than the surface web, as we call it. So there are more websites on the dark web offering criminal activity than there are sites on the normal web, and that's a scary thought when you think about it. As it says there, 60 million estimate of sites on the dark web, and that is giving you sort of some idea of the size, really. And of course, the dark web is actually real. Now, this is a slide which I do actually like to show my operations director from time to time, especially at salary review time. Now, this is an actual excerpt from a real advert on the dark web. Starting, as I say, they run it as a business, so they are offering new hackers as a starting salary $762,000 a year. Then after your 90-day probationary period, yes, they have probationary periods too, they will increase that after 2 successful hacks to $1 million a year. Now that gives you some idea of the size of these businesses. If they can afford to pay an individual 1 million, they will be making considerably more out of that individual. So it's run as a business, and unfortunately I don't get $1 million a year, but I do keep asking. So what does it look like? Well, this is sort of a part of a data breach report. So a lot of the screens I'm going to show you are from the dark web. Now, we've got experts and people that go onto the dark web now. I would suggest you never try and attempt to do so. You may hear of people that use browsers and tools to do so, but don't be tempted. When you're on there, you are really quite open to being attacked. And if you get a machine on there and you haven't got the relative protection in time in place, you can really get yourself in a lot of danger. But this is a report really. So this is what they're paying. So you can see on here a clone MasterCard with PIN was $15 in 2020. It went up to 2025, and of course it does depend on the value. So if they've got higher balances on the credit cards, they're worth more to the criminals, and that's what we actually see. This is a website where you can actually go onto, and as I say, welcome back. Thank you for giving us another chance to provide you with the best credit cards. It's just like a real website. They are running it as a business. So you can buy whatever you wish. So you can buy Visa credit cards with balances up to 5,000, up to 10,000. And these exist out on the website. These companies are actually just running it as a business. There's another example. This looks a little bit like a shopping site, doesn't it? You can actually choose what you want, what type of information you want, add it to your basket, and then buy them. It does seem incredible, but this is exactly the way it works on the dark web. They will sell these and sell them over and over again, actually, because they're not unscrupulous like that. But it is literally a big business. And another example is, and this is actually from a phishing site that you can buy. I think this costs $39. You can actually get yourself a nice little portal where you can see how your ransomware infections are doing and how many people you've infected. And once you can go out onto the dark web, you can buy yourself several million IP addresses or passwords. You put them into your tool, hit the button, and you sit there and you wait. And it will pop up on your little portal when somebody has clicked that email and they put their information in. And at that point, that's when you go in there. And this is exactly how they run it. They do run it as a business. They'll even curate your fraud for you. They have help desks, fully automated systems, and they do it for you for a percentage. So it really is a big business out there. So what can you do? As I say, train. That's really your biggest thing that you can do for your staff. Layer your security. If they get past one layer, they will then hit the next. So having your firewalls in place, having your antivirus, having your training, having your spam filters, layer it so that it gets, if it gets past one, the next layer will stop it. They protect your employees. Be suspicious. Think before clicking links. If you ever see anything which is urgent, click this now. You really need to do this, or I need this done before I go on holiday, or anything like that. Always be suspicious of it. Always pick up that phone, check with the person. Always go to a separate website and check the details. Don't ever click on the links. Always these sort of things. Make sure you're just being a little bit careful. If you're not using two-factor authentication, do so. Switch to it. That is the number one thing which can help protect you. Now, you're not totally immune, because we're now seeing a little bit of two-factor authentication. What we see, tiredness, where people are getting a little bit blasé about it. They're getting so many approved messages that they're just clicking on it. Hackers tend to realize that, so you will start to see them target you around 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning when you log on. So make sure that when you get that approved for your multi-factor authentication, it is you and not the hacker. Because if they manage to get your password and then trying to get into your system and you click on that approve, then they're in. There are ways to change that. So, for instance, you can have it so that it will prompt your authenticator app. If you're using multi-factor authentication, it will prompt your authenticator app for a number, which you then have to type in again, and that's different every time. So there are ways of doing that, but multi-factor authentication is definitely the suggestion. And if you're not using it, you should be. It's actually a requirement now for Cyber Essentials on all cloud-based systems. At user level and administrator level. So Office, Microsoft Office, Office 365, SharePoint, and any other cloud-based, Google cloud-based or AWS cloud-based. If you're using those systems, multi-factor authentication would be a requirement now for Cyber Essentials. So, as I say, if your details are on the dark web, normally it can be a while before you know about it. So one way you can actually try and reduce that is by scanning the dark web, having dark web scans. Are your credentials up there? So this can really be very useful. So dark web scanning services are around. There will be information about it in our pack that we should send out later. But it's always useful to know whether your credentials have appeared on the dark web. If you know within, say, 24 hours, there may be something you can do. You can change your password. You can shut down that account just to make sure you are there. And if your data's been breached, it's very useful to know that perhaps your date of birth and that sort of information has suddenly become available on the internet, on the dark web. Because if you know about it, you can be prepared. So dark web scanning is a very useful thing to be doing. And as I say, user education. I've harped on about it a lot in this, but yeah, make sure you are training your staff. And as I say, training, short, sharp, doesn't always have to be boring. Hour-long, 2-hour-long, 3-hour-long courses. Quick 5 minutes. These are the things to look out for. Reinforcing that message and reinforce it regularly, just to make sure that your staff are aware. And of course, if you've trained your staff, you want to make sure they actually do understand it. So if you are training your staff, just test them in some way. Sort of, you can be tests, phishing simulations and things like that, just to make sure that they are taking on board your training. And that's nearly it. But as I say, as a thank you for attending today, and I've covered an awful lot of information. we will be sending you a security pack out today with information. Please do have a read. If you have any questions or anything now, we should cover them now. Yes, thank you very much. Have a look, see if we've got any questions.
Thanks, David. Yeah, really, really interesting stuff you covered there. We don't have any questions in the chat. If anyone does have any, feel free to yeah, stay on the call and fire it into the chat. But if not, yeah, Charlotte, is there anything further you'd like to add?
No, just obviously thank you very much to Utilise and David for presenting at today's webinar. We're hoping that everyone found it really useful, and there's some really good points on there. So what we'll do is after the session closes, we'll be sending everyone just a follow-up email, and Utilise have kindly produced some documents. I think there's 5 or 6 attachments on there. So if you receive those, you are able to open them and click on the link. So we have learned something from today. And then there also, as I say, David's offering a dark web review as well. So we'll send you a follow-up. We'll add the link to the recording as well, just in case you want to look back on everything. And we'll also include their email address. So if you do have any questions at all, then feel free to pop up.
I think we've also got a hand up as well there, Charlotte, somewhere.
Yeah, I can see Lucy Denning. Yeah, if you want to come off mute and ask away, that's fine.
Hi all, thank you for the webinar. Really interesting stuff, and actually feeling some form of relief, because I feel that as an SME we're actually, you know, in a relatively good position in terms of our cybersecurity. We have Cyber Essentials Plus, we undertake our penetration testing, we have multi-factor authentication enabled on all business applications. We do the Mimecast and Know Before training as well, which is mandatory across our business. So generally actually feeling quite good about our position currently. For, you know, we've only got about 59 members of staff within our business. One of the things that is cropping up is cyber insurance. Now, the Cyber Essentials Plus offers us a relatively small pot of money in the event of a cyber attack. I think in terms of the actual insurance industry, though, for cyber risk, it's quite a minefield, and trying to understand what we should be insuring against, what level of insurance is, you know, required for our business is, you know, something that we're really struggling with. Our brokers seem to think that it's actually going to, you know, eventually come in as a contractual requirement across our projects and obviously our industry. Is there any advice that you can give there in terms of what to look out for in terms of cyber insurance?
Yes, I mean, yes, first of all, yeah, well done. You've got a very good set of protection there in place, and as you quite rightly say, I mean, Cyber Essential schemes gives you £25,000, I think, at a basic level for insurance. What I would always say is always assume the worst happens. So say you have a breach and your systems are down, how long is it going to take you to recover them? And these are the sort of questions you'd be looking at. So if you're doing, say, backup recoveries, how long does it take you to recover your systems? So test your backups, get an idea. So if it's going to be taking you 3 or 4 days, then obviously you're going to want to know how much business you're going to lose, how much it's then going to cost to do things such as forensic examinations, to recover the data, etc. So I would always try and work through a scenario to see what happens in the worst case, and then work backwards from that, and then look for that level of cover, really. Yeah, you sounds like you've got a lot of protection in place, but you know, always look at the worst possible scenario, really. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, Charlotte, you're on mute.
Oh, hello, sorry. We've got another question in the chat from Pambos, saying, why are banks not doing more to stop fraudsters opening bank accounts, facilitating their frauds? Once the fraudster has taken your money, why can't the bank not give it back?
Yeah, it is a difficult one, but I mean, unfortunately, we work in a global economy, so a lot of these bank accounts, etc., will be in areas of the world where perhaps they don't have so much control or regulation of the banking industry, or perhaps they even turned a blind eye to it totally. And of course, most cyber criminals also work in cryptocurrency, which makes it very, very difficult to track. So the banks are doing a lot. I mean, you see a lot of them are now offering like free dark web scanning for your bank account. They are looking for security certificates on your mobile phones and things like this to prove it's you, tying it down to particular devices. So they are constantly battling. But unfortunately, and I've got to say this, for every pound that the banks spend, the cyber criminals will spend 10 trying to get in. They have that amount of money. I mean, as I say, they've switched. A lot of them are switching from the drug trafficking to the cyber crime. So it is a constant battle of keeping one step ahead of them all the time, I'm afraid.
And we have just one more question from Joanne Chalice. I think she's from a charity. So it says, this may sound very simple, but I have to open attachments from emails that are sometimes poorly written. I receive grant applications from small charities. I have Norton protection, but this seems to overflag. What could I be opening up worst case? I'm the only employee, there is no network.
Okay, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it's sometimes difficult to distinguish between a badly written email and a phish one. I would always say that sometimes, if you open an email, it will become obvious that it's a phish one. But if you're just not sure, don't click any links in it. Just ring up the person if you can, or contact them directly via their email if you know it separately, not through that email, that actual email itself. But it is difficult. What you need to just make sure that you do is all your checks. Is it coming from the domain you expect it's coming from? Has it got any malicious or strange links that you wouldn't expect? Is the message what you'd expect to receive from a person who's emailing you? If there's anything which you're just not a little bit sure about, then just don't click those links. Don't put any information in there. Always go separately or ring the person up. So.
I think we've got time just for one more question. So this one's from Charlene Morris. Please, can you confirm about the appropriate level of insurance cover that should be applied for potential cybercrime?
As I say, that will depend on your business. I mean, it really depends on how much your business would lose in the event of having some sort of cyber attack. You need to understand what the potential impact would be to you. So, for instance, if your IT systems were down for 4 or 5 days, what would that cause you in terms of business loss? So you need to make sure you're insured for that. You need to go slightly above that because you're going to have to recover systems. You may have to pay your, as I say, forensic examinations, external bodies to come in and check your systems as well. So it's not sort of one size fits all. It will always depend upon your individual business as to what you deem as necessary.
David, just quickly, just to cover off in the chat. So within Cyber Essentials, the Cyber Essentials basic plan, that includes basic cyber insurance. Is that right? And is that the basic cover up to £25,000?
Yes, if you're a company with a turnover less than 20 million, based in the UK, Cyber Essentials does come with a £25,000 cyber liability insurance. Now it is very basic, and And of course, you only get it if you actually have all the things which are required for Cyber Essentials in place. And should you claim on it, expect to be checked to make sure that what you said in the form is actually the truth. I do come across organisations that bend the truth slightly from time to time, shall we say. And of course, insurance companies will expect for you to have had multi-factor authentication on that account, to have had a password which is at least 8 characters complex, with other things in place like that, lockout policies. They will expect you to have antivirus up to date and your systems to have been running the latest operating systems. So expect them to check this if you have to claim on that insurance. As I say, it's very, very basic. So most organisations, £25,000 maybe will cover perhaps a day, but most outages will be longer than that. So I would always say, don't rely on that. Get what's right for your business. It's nice to have that as a top up, but don't rely on the Cyber Essentials security insurance policy.
We just had one more question pop in further to that from Lucy Denning, saying, following from Charlene, what about ransomware within the insurance policy? What is the average ransomware cost to a business?
There are various stats. It will depend, of course, on what you need to do. If you've got good backups and you can recover from it, it's really the downtime to your systems to recover your backups. So, you know, that could be potentially hours, it could be potentially days. It just depends upon your backups and how good they are. But on average, the estimate for the average ransomware attack is around about £4,200 here in the UK. That's what it costs. So for some organisations it will be more, some it may be less. But that's not paying out any ransomware payments to it's just to recover from the actual downtime. And of course, it's difficult to quantify the cost to you from your reputation as well. So that's always difficult to actually put a number to.
Well, thank you everyone for your questions and for attending today. I think that brings the session to a close. Thanks again to Utilise and to David. And we hope you all have a lovely day, and we will hopefully speak to you soon. Bye everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.